Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome. Y'all come on in. Thank you all for being here. Those of you who are logging on, welcome. Glad everybody is here this morning. Spirit of God, we're always in your presence. Where can we go from your presence? God is real. God is here. God is here because we're here. We bless the synergy of this meeting today. Something happens when each of us brings his or her energy into this geographical location. Something happens that's unprecedented and indefinable. It is the manna that we are unable to name. What is it? What is it? We don't know what it is, but it produces life. And so we once again say, give us this day our daily what is it? Give us this day our daily manna. And whatever needs to happen on this last Sunday of August in 2024, let it be. Let it happen. These gates lift up their heads so that that glory can come in. We channel the power of God into this space. And onto this recording, and whoever listens to this podcast later or watches this YouTube video, they will experience, there will be a now experience. We thank you for that. We thank you for that. Let's just, in reverence, just lift up our hands and prepare our hearts. Lifting up hands, that's not just a Pentecostal thing. That's a God thing. It means so many things. It's a way to center yourself, to get yourself into a place of experiencing God, manifesting God. Bless the Lord, O my soul, all that is within me. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not his benefits, who forgives all my iniquities, heals all my diseases, who satisfies my mouth with good things so that my youth is renewed like the eagles. God is great and greatly to be praised. Amen. Please remain standing. Y'all come on in. Please remain standing. Let's do the Lord's Prayer. Please, our Father who art in heaven, presence of divine love and light that lives within us and within all of life, hallowed be thy name. We invoke the powerful creative nature of all that is sacred and holy. Thy kingdom come. We embrace the healing essence that is the kingdom of heaven within us. Thy will be done. We accept our greatest good as we align with our divine nature. On earth as it is in heaven, knowing that the affairs of our lives reflect our evolving consciousness. Give us this day our daily bread. Each day we receive blessings from within and throughout all the activities of our lives. And forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. We accept the divine nature of all things and all people, including ourselves, as we move away from judgment and toward greater awareness of divine presence. And lead us not into temptation. We shall be vigilant in expressing and experiencing the oneness with all life. But deliver us from evil as we are learning to live without fault-finding and suffering. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. For we accept the consciousness of divine perfection with all its power and glory right here, right now, and forever. Amen. And so it is. Tell somebody that you love them and act like you mean it. And then you may be seated. And then you may be seated. I want to remind you that our outreach this month is Save the Children. And I was looking back I've got a photo album online of 10 years at Metron, we've actually given this, I've noticed that we've given to Save the Children several times. And again, a great charity. Anytime you Google best charities to give to, it's always like in the top 5 that are vetted. So anyway, that's part of where your giving is going. I still haven't scheduled meditation weekend number 23 yet. I talked to the guy at Unicoi this week, and the place I wanted to rent is booked. So I thought, okay, that's fine. I hung up. Well, he called me right back, and he said, you sounded so, no, he didn't say you sounded so disappointed. He said, I hate to disappoint anybody. Have you called our sister property? I said, what's that? He said, Amicalola. I said, no, actually, I've thought about Amicalola before. Years ago, we went there one day. Remember we ate at Smith House at Dahlonega and went up there. So I've got to call into them. It definitely is going to be the last weekend of October if you need to go ahead and get your schedules. I may just say we haven't done one in Dahlonega, and it's really cool up there that time of year. So I would say I'll know for sure next week, but these days I don't know what's going to happen from day to day. So we'll go somewhere. We're going to have number 23, but I don't have a definite announcement for you. Oh, come on in, come in. Welcome. Come in. And I think that was all the announcements that we needed to do today. Everybody had a good week? Good. Eddie's had a busy week. No, it's really cool. It's like you've kind of turned into a ministry. It's really very interesting to see how that's all worked out. Very cool. I think, you know what? I think today I'm just going to go and get right into the teaching, if that's okay, and if y'all are ready. So, say what? It's like I always tell you with the meditation weekends, it doesn't take us a long time to get into it. I said, I know this is an R-rated analogy. I said, but when you've driven all the way here and you're ready for it, you don't need any foreplay. It's just like, we both know what we're here for. Do you know what I mean? I think everybody knows what I mean. It's like, you don't have to get me in the mood. I'm in the mood. That's why I drove here. I could take that metaphor a little further, but I think you get the idea. We have this space for a limited amount of time, if you get my drift. We're grown folks. We don't. Welcome to the Metron Live podcast, coming to you from the Kirkwood neighborhood, Midtown Atlanta adjacent. As always, we appreciate Charles McFall, the rock god of podcasting, who is celebrating his 20th year in podcasting excellence. So those of you that are listening to this podcast, that applause coming from real live people who got in their cars and drove here. Some of them from Noonan. Anybody come further than Noonan? You're in Marietta, right? Y'all are here because you want to be here. Scripture says there is a reward for those who diligently seek him. And I think when you make the extra effort to be here, even Tricia wrote something last week. She said, I usually watch you online. And she said, I don't know how to quote you exactly, but she said, there's nothing like being, when we say ITB, that means in the building. That's she said there really is a different vibe when you're there in person. And that was interesting from someone who's only streamed before. So we speak in this atmosphere and we say, let there be light. This will be our third and final installment of this series. My title, it's about perception, Cool graphics today, by the way, Michelle. I like the bee, although it was messing with my ADD. I was trying to read the things, and I was like, "Where's the bee going?" But no, it's cool. Things known and unknown, opening up the portals of perception for personal progression. We're talking about not just perception. I've talked a lot about perception for years, but specifically how it affects your reality. It's not just what you say that creates reality. It really is what you see. And, when the 12 spies were sent into Canaan, the outcome of their military efforts was determined by what those 12 men saw. And 10 of them came back, and they saw, they weren't just being negative. They saw a reality. They saw giants in the land, Jebusites and Hittites and Girgashites. Not only were they not being negative, God had already spoken to Moses and said, these entities are going to be there. You're going to have to deal with them. So it not only was not just not being, it was not negative, it was actually confirming what Moses said was the word of the Lord. Joshua and Caleb saw the same. They were there all together, and they saw something entirely different. They never said that the giants weren't real. They just said, yeah, but we have a word that we're well able to take this land. What we see is the green light from God. How can there be 12 people and 10 of them see one thing and 2 see something entirely different? And the 40 years in the wilderness, if that was a literal thing, was in response to what those 10 spies had seen. The wilderness experience was to allow that first generation to die off until a new generation could come in and see something different. I'm not going to give a disclaimer to say this is not a political statement, because I guess it sort of is. But I watched both political conventions, and they were both well produced. The Republican, for production values, well done. So was the Democrat. What was interesting to me is hearing people who were looking at the same reality but saying America's great and we're excited about the future and America's not going down the tubes. You could still say America's great and not deny that there are problems. You feel me what I'm saying? Because when all you're hearing is America's on its last legs, it's kind of hard to wave a flag for that. When somebody says, yeah, we got work to do, but man, even the Democratic candidate, she said, my story and our story could only happen in the greatest country in the world. This is a country where, doesn't she know there was slavery? Yeah, she does. Don't you know there's gun violence? Yeah. And I don't want to get ahead of myself. It's kind of what I would talk about today. Sort of what we were talking about last Sunday. Like it's not the either or, it's the yes and. I'll get to that in a minute. But let me show you our main verse that we're using, and I'll go back to let me use all New King James today. This is Mathew 6, verse 22 and 23. It's where he says, the lamp of the body is the eye. If therefore your eye is good, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body, and we say body, that's an avatar for physical reality. He's not just talking about your physical body. It means everything that's happening around you. But if your eye is bad, your whole body, or your perception of the physical world will be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? You can argue with people, you can lecture people, you can preach to people until somebody changes the way they see a thing. All the arguing in the world isn't going to change them. We watched, they were showing all Grace Kelly movies yesterday, and I've never been that much of a Grace Kelly fan, but we were home most of the day, so we watched several of them. There's the one that she won the Academy Award for. I'd never seen it before. It's called The Country Girl, and it's with Bing Crosby, and it's it's pretty dark. But what was interesting is there's a storyline. You don't know why these people are so broken until they show this flashback of when they had a young son who the dad, played by Bing Crosby, was had a drinking problem, but he was kind of like a Broadway star. And one day they show a flashback of when their little boy was alive, and there's a scene where Bing Crosby walks out on the street and isn't paying attention, and the child runs in front of a car and gets killed. And it completely changes the perception of the movie, because you think, oh, that's what's the William Holden character is like, what is wrong with you people? And he hates her, and he's sending her away and saying, you're a nag. And once he finds out, oh, that's what your whole deal is, your life shut down after your child died. And so many movies, from Gone with the Wind to whatever, are all about how the arc of the story changes when perception was changed, or when there was a paradigm shift. I think the first person to really make that term paradigm shift into the zeitgeist, into the popular lexicon, was Stephen Covey. Years ago, wrote that book, 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. And when he explains paradigm shift, I've referred to this before many times. He says that he was on a train one day, and this man gets on the train with a bunch of kids, and the kids are like crazed. They're like running up and down the aisles and grabbing newspapers out of people's hands and screaming. And he said, I looked at this man like, what is wrong with you? Don't you see your kids are like terrorizing the train? So finally he said, sir, can you do something to rein these children in? And the man was just sitting there with his eyes closed, with his head back, and he opened his eyes and said, I'm sorry, I'm not even paying attention. He said, their mother died about half an hour ago, and we're just leaving the hospital, and they're just in shock. And he said, once I heard that, it completely changed the scenario, and then I was trying to help, and everybody that overheard was trying to help. And not that you will just go around hearing everybody's sad tales all the time, but sometimes you can't know somebody until you know what they've been through. And when somebody tells you, oh, this is why this is happening, sometimes it makes you so much easier to deal with the situation, because until you know the full story, you're only seeing them through your window. Then once you see through their window, you're like, oh, well, that changes everything. That's a paradigm shift. And I could, I won't lecture you about movies, but I could go through so many of my favorite movies are based on that concept, that the story goes one way, and then you find out, oh, this is what really happened. Whether you call it a plot twist or a flashback or whatever, then it changes everything. And until that happens to you, you're gonna guard your paradigm. When somebody challenges the way you see a thing, unless it's just somebody you're very open to, you're going to be defensive. Like you want to protect why you see a thing the way that you do. So what Jesus is saying here, and it's interesting if you read the full context, this is the passage where he's talking about, don't worry about what you're going to eat or what you're going to wear, seek first the kingdom of God, which is something we could all be reminded of fairly regularly, because sometimes you think, well, how are we going to keep paying for this? How are we going to keep doing this? I do it sometimes. I shouldn't, but I'm just thinking, this is how much Mom's assisted living costs every month. This is how many years she can live. If she lives past that, what the heck are we going to do? I mean, I don't know what I'm going to do. I mean, I hate to say that, but I'm thinking, because I'm paying all the bills, I'm like, okay, we can. I mean, there was one day this week I thought, good Lord, if she, how long did her sisters? I know this is terrible. I'm just from a practical standpoint thinking about the money, And like, God, her sisters lived in their 90s. So I'm like, well, I could sell the house and then we'll breeze, we're going to blow through that. And I guess, I don't know, I'll have to get an apartment with her somewhere to take care of. Like, I don't know what to, and I mean, I was kind of freaking out one day. And I thought, take no thought for tomorrow. Sufficient unto the day is the evil there. You could win the lottery. Who knows? You could go before she does. It's like, like, what the heck? Have you ever done that before where there's a day, like today is a day in August, but you're totally living in October? And, as far as you're concerned, it might as well be next year because you're thinking ahead. And again, it's not worrying, it's just thinking like, well, I got to think, how does this money going to be allotted and what, and so we all have to be reminded of this. And when he said these verses, the previous two verses, because in this original passage, he was specifically talking about the way you see abundance and wealth. Because the previous two verses is where he says you can't serve God and mammon, you will either love the one and hate the other. And that's when he says the way you see a thing. Like if you see yourself as poor, you know what you're going to manifest? Poverty. That's why sometimes, and some of you know this principle, when you don't know where the next meal is going to come from, and you just have you remember when the prophet goes to the widow and he says, how are you doing? She says, well, there's a famine in the land, and I just have enough meal and oil left to make one little cake for my son and me, and I'm gonna make that, then we're gonna die. And so he says, if a preacher said this today, there would be blogs about him, but he said, go make the cake for me. Can you imagine if you heard that on the news? Like, I can't believe that sorry, no good preacher, all that woman's got is enough for her and her son. And he's saying, and make something for me. But what he was changing her paradigm. And so she did, and she had abundance. Then the oil couldn't be cut off. So that's why sometimes I've done this in years past where I thought, you know what? We can't realistically afford to go eat out tonight. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to go eat out. Because sometimes you have to change the mentality. Like, order what you want on the menu. Get dessert. Do whatever. Because, when if you're to that point where one last meal is going to do you in, you might as well go enjoy it. Because it ain't going to make what you're going to spend on this meal ain't going to be enough to pay your rent. So you might as well, at least, if we're going to go down, let's go down full. But what it does is it changes your paradigm. Sometimes it's a holy thing just to do something good for yourself or to change your mentality or not just keep saying you can't afford something. You have to tell yourself, yeah, we can. And that's what he's saying here. He's saying it's applicable to all of life. But where he talks about God and mammon, he says the way you see abundance is how you're going to manifest abundance. The way you see lack. I would go so far as to say the way you pray about abundance, it identifies how you see it. Like if you're always praying to get out of debt, the universe is picking up the vibe that all you're doing is thinking about debt. So that's the concept of calling those things which are not as though they are. Is changing from one of the 10 spies into a Joshua and a Caleb. I want to show you several instances from the scriptures. This next one is, this is Genesis 15. This is the Genesis 13, 14, and 15. It's the whole passage about how Abram and Sarai became Abraham and Sarah, which is relevant to today. I mean, I was watching the news this morning, and, Israel bombed Hezbollah as a preemptive strike against Iran. And it's all of this could be traced back to Ishmael versus Isaac. And 2 chapters before this, in chapter 13, is where God speaks to Abram and he says, lift up your eyes and look from the place where you now stand. And he said, look to the north, south, east, and west. That's how many descendants I'm going to give you. And it kind of goes in chapter 13, it kind of goes in one ear and out the other into Abraham. So when we get 2 chapters later to chapter 15, this is, the way I picture this is Abraham's out in the desert. He's in a tent. When you're in a tent, all you can see above you is the canopy. Reality goes up as high as this tent. There's nothing higher than that. And that's why he says, come out of the tent and look up and count the stars if you can. Meaning, you're not going to be able to, but it's going to change. If all you see is inside the tent, that's going to be the extent of your reality. The lamp of the eye is the body. The lamp of the body is the eye. So here's what he says in, this is verses 1 through 5 in the New King James. It says, after these things, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision, saying, do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your exceedingly great reward. But Abram said, Lord God, what will you give me, seeing I go childless, and the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus? Like, Abraham and Sarah didn't have any children of their own, and so the way the law was, your estate would go to your servant. He says, then Abram said, he says, look, you have given me no offspring. Indeed, one born in my house is my heir. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, saying, this one shall not be your heir, but one who will come from your own body shall be your heir. Then he brought him outside. That's very symbolic of coming out of a reality that is finite. You know, until you see something else is possible, it's not even real to you. You have to see that a thing can happen before you can even believe that it can happen. So he says, look now toward heaven and count the stars if you were able to number them. And he said to him, so shall your descendants be. In other words, if all you think of is what the parameters inside this tent, inside these boundaries, of course you're never going to have, you're not going to have any children. You and Sarah have been together all these years. You've never produced anything. You're certainly not going to produce anything now. You're both elderly. And when he says, come out and count the stars if you can, the implication is you're never going to be able to count the stars. But what he's saying is look at possibilities. You know, I've done that my whole ministry career. I remember when we were building Church of the Now, the first building at Church of the Now. This is back in the mid-'90s, and what became the children's building, but our first building. I wasn't sure. I mean, building kind of wasn't my jam. I'm not a builder. That just seemed like, well, that's what you're supposed to do. We're obviously growing, so that's what you do is you build buildings. I think now where I'm at, I don't know that's how I would do things, but that was the light that I was walking in at the time. And I remember, this is back before GPS or cell phones or anything like that. I remember going out to and I loved Kenneth Hagin, but this one, I went to their Bible seminar out in Tulsa. And man, I just was not on the wavelength with him. The stuff that he was saying, people were taking notes like they'd never heard it before. And I'm like, this is like I'm not equating myself with Kenneth Hagin. It's just, I know all this stuff. Like I can't pretend like I've never heard this before. I just taught the same thing Wednesday night. Then, I'm looking around, everybody's looking at each other like, oh my God, we've never heard it. I'm like, I could give you a whole tape series. I just basically said these exact same things. And so I'm like, why did I come to this thing? Like, why am I here? Because, when everybody else is talking about how great the food is, and you're like, Must not be my place. Again, nothing against him. I was like, why did I spend the money to fly out here? This is not working for me. And I remember sitting there thinking, Willie George has a church here in Tulsa. I want to go see what his building looks like. So I got I swear I had no idea where I was going. I've used actual GPS so much now, I'm not sure I can still do this. But there was a time I could get in the car and just go, where is it? And I would find it. And so I got there before I got here about half of his Wednesday night sermon. But the main thing is he had one of those churches that if you had children and you lived in Tulsa, you had to go to his church. I mean, it was like he had the premier children's ministry. And even though I was nothing like him, like his persona was like a cowboy, he did this thing called Gospel Bill, I could see the way they had poured money into children's ministry. And I remember walking around going, oh, this is why I came to Tulsa. I didn't emulate it, but it stimulated something in me. I thought, oh, I got it. I know why I came. And I went back and totally, everything we designed for the children's ministry was out of that trip. Because I thought, oh, I saw it. I got out of my tent and counted the stars. I used to tell this years ago. It's not so relevant now, but, being in Conyers for years, especially in the early years, there was so much pettiness between pastors of little churches out there, and it was ongoing. And I was in the middle of all these, especially because I'd been divorced, and then when Debbie and I got married, there were these pastors that wouldn't speak to me, and like I went to this one prayer breakfast, and I sat across from these pastors that literally picked up newspapers and opened them in my face so they couldn't speak to me. And I was like, what the hell am I doing in this little town? I hate it here. I mean, the fact that I know many of y'all live there, but the fact that I went into alien territory and prevailed in a hostile environment, because it just was. And I remember I had gone to Burger King that afternoon, and I ordered a Whopper. And I remember I came back, Debbie was working in the office, and this was the story I was telling. I went to Burger King today, and I said, no tomato, no onion on my Whopper, but when I opened that bun, there was a tomato and onion. I'm like, oh my God, this is my story? I'm like, I've got to get out of this town. Like, this is making me really, really small. And I told her, I said, find me a minister's conference to go to, a big one, and put me on a plane, a big plane. Find me a hotel to stay in, a tall one. Put me on the highest floor. I've got to change my vision. I'm dealing with petty little pastors of little congregations, and it's making me small. I'm telling you anecdotes about a stupid Whopper. I'm not this guy. I'm like a world changer. I'm a visionary. I'm a man of purpose, and I opened up the bun. I asked for no tomato, but there was tomato on it. I'm like, God almighty, is this who I've become? I'm the guy that when you speak, history changes. And I said, I got to get out of town. I got to go somewhere. I got to see big ministry. Because that's where my head was at the time. Now, I'm so evolved from that now, I would be more interested in other things. Fast forward to, I wanted to hear the guy I am now. I wanted to hear Joe Dispenza speak. But I didn't want to go spend $10,000 for something like, I would just like to hear him in person, because I'm drawn to this guy. I go online. He's got an Atlanta seminar literally 2 blocks from my house. I go online. They serve lunch in the middle of the thing. I'm at a table with the people on this side flew from South Africa. People over here flew from Norway. People across the table flew from Tokyo. So everybody at the luncheon is talking about, where are you from? So when they asked me, they said, where are you from? I said, lean back. You see through that window, that red brick building? That's where I live. I said, actually, y'all are all in my reality. I wanted y'all to come here. And so when I came, that's where all the meditation weekends came out of that. Because he was advertising they were going to do this meditation weekend in Maui. It was going to cost thousands of dollars. But he's showing clips of it, and I'm looking at it thinking, I could totally do that, like on a smaller scale. It was very similar to years earlier when I was more into building buildings, and I saw Willie George's church. Now I've already done buildings. I'm not interested in that. I'm more interested in leaving a legacy now. And so when he did that, I thought, oh, you just gave me something I could see. So I go start teaching y'all about meditation. One day I said, you know what we ought to do? We ought to drive somewhere that's within 3 or 4 hours, see if anybody wants to come. I didn't know if anybody's going to come. I remember telling Ken, we were standing out there on the beach, I said, I'm pretty sure Ernie and Avery are coming. It may just be the 4 of us, so we'll see. 60 people come walking out there. We've done 22 of them now. They've all been 50, 60, 70 people somewhere in there. Not the same group. I've got some people that have never even been to Metron that come to these things. And when I told the guy this week, he said, tell me about your meditation group. I was telling him, he said, you've done 22 of them? I said, yeah. He said, like, how many people do you have? I said, I don't know, 50, 60. It's usually in there. I said, any more than that, it's not so easy to manage, so that's a good size. He said, oh my God, that's amazing. He said, where can I find information about you? And I said, well, Google me, but be prepared. There's a lot on there, but I'm easy to find. And again, it was something I had never thought of doing. Well, now we've done 22 of them that have all been successful and have had miracles. I don't think we haven't done one that didn't have some miraculous thing that happened. It's not just a large group of people going different locations. It's something unprecedented has happened in nearly every one of them. Huh? Oh, that's right. We even did one in Hawaii. You're right. It was that one. That was very interesting how that one turned out. We weren't physically in Hawaii, but we were in Hawaii. And that one was very, very cool. But again, until you can see, it's not that you're emulating. I'm not Joe Dispenza. I mean, he doesn't open his talks with Genesis chapter 15. But I saw something that I thought, oh, that resonates with me. That and the way I do mine is different from the way he does his. But it gave me a picture. Can anybody relate to what I'm saying? That you saw somebody else do something and you're like, oh, now I'm not trying to copy them. They just opened up a new neuropath in my brain. I didn't know that was possible because I hadn't seen that before. Now that I've seen it, oh, that's cool. There was, again, it's going to sound political, but there was a shot that somebody got of Kamala Harris's speech, and it showed the back of a little girl's head. I think it was one of her nieces. And you could tell she's a little black girl, and it's something. It reminded me of a Norman Rockwell painting because it's showing this little girl looking at a black woman who's very possibly could be president of the United States. And that I thought, wow, that picture says so much because a million little white boys have seen white men be president for over 200 years. I mean, you could say to a little white boy, one day you can be president. And they're like, yeah, duh. You know. But to see a little black girl looking at a successful black woman, and not just in politics, but just seeing that something that's within the realm of possibility. Until you see that it can happen, you don't believe it. But you've got to get out of the tent. And let me tell you something. We're all walking around with tents rolled up. we're all nomads going through life with a tent rolled up on our back. And every time it's time to make the next move to go to the next level, we start driving those stakes in the ground. There's my tent. This is my reality at this stage of my life. There's nothing higher than that canopy over my head. How many times have I said over the years, there's no point in arguing with chickens and trying to tell them the eagles can fly because they don't believe it. They haven't seen it. A chicken's never seen an eagle fly above the clouds. So if you say to a chicken, you know you can fly, which I don't know if a chicken anatomically could, but you know, she posted a bumblebee. Aeronautically, bumblebees can't fly. Just nobody told them they couldn't. So here he says, if you can see it, you can have it. But until you see it, until the lamp of the body is illuminated, the body never progresses. Without vision, the people perish. And it happens. There's people perishing every day of their lives. The people going through life, dead man walking, because they just haven't seen anything else. The next thing I want to show you, this is fast forward in that story. This is Joshua chapter 6, verse 1 and 2. I've never heard anybody else teach on this, and it's one of my favorite things, especially because of the punctuation. This is the story. This is 40 years later, after Joshua and Caleb and the 10 spies. This is after Israel's been in the wilderness for 40 years. Again, it's immaterial to me whether that was literally 40 years or not. That's beside the point. If it was, fine. If it wasn't, fine. But this is when they had the manna every day, and they were led by a cloud by day and a fire by night, and et cetera, et cetera. So now they've made, and I understand, I've read all the things about the geography of that area. People have said it's impossible for millions of people to have been lost for that, for that many years. I don't know, maybe not. I don't know. These are ancient people who are recording these things, so you have to see these things through ancient eyes. Again, the point of the story remains. So this is after they finally made the track, and now they're back to Jericho, which is the first city that you encounter in the Promised Land. And it's basically, where were we 40 years ago? Like, wow, that was a long 40 years. But now all those original non-visionaries have died off. Now we're ready. What was I saying 40 years ago? Now we're ready to get back to there. Y'all with me in the story? So this is what it says in Joshua 6, verse 1. Now Jericho was wide open, and there was a big sign posted over the gates of Jericho that said, "Congratulations, Israelites. You've been in the wilderness for 40 years, and now it's ready for you." It says, now Jericho was securely shut up because of the children of Israel. None went out, and none came in. Womp, womp, womp. That's when you want to cuss. When you're like, seriously? We've been roaming around here for 40 years, and it looks exactly like it did 40 years ago. Nothing's changed. All of our relatives have died off. We thought by now, surely there's a new president, a new regime, something. No, it didn't even look a little better. It says, Jericho was securely shut up. None went in and none came out. So you can't even get a battle strategy. This is back when cities were surrounded by a wall that had, soldiers on the wall, so that, that was, once a city was fortified like that, they could close their gates and they were impenetrable. This is back before there were bombs and grenades and missiles. It was just like, unless you've got a Trojan horse to get in, it's shut up. You can't get in. These ancient cities were fortified. You don't throw a grenade over the wall. There's no such thing. If you ever just pictured something in your head, you wanted it to go a certain way, and it was just the opposite, and you get there, it's like, womp, womp. You know what I've learned the hard way over the years? If I'm going somewhere, like especially in another city, like if there's a thing I want to go see, or a restaurant I want to eat at, or a museum, you know what I've learned by experience? Give them a call and make sure they're open that day. Or make sure they're not under renovations. You remember the original Vacation movie when the Griswolds are going, they want to go to that amusement park, the whole thing, and they get there and it's closed. I've learned, because I love museums, but I've learned with every museum usually is closed one day of the week. I've learned that by experience. First time, Ken and I finally went there, but the first time I love Salvador Dali, and I wanted to go to the Dali Museum down in St. Petersburg. Drove all the way down there. Got there on a Thursday. Guess what? They're closed on Thursdays. And it had been one of those days where it was, my GPS system wasn't working that well that day, and it had been very challenging to find it, to where then I'm like, as God is my witness, I'm going to find this museum. And you get there, you're like, no, you're not. And it's right there on the door, closed Thursdays. I'm standing there, wah, wah. That's why I've learned, even with, especially since COVID, I never know what's still open and what I've learned now. Before we go there, before you say, let's go, we haven't been to such restaurant, let's make sure it's still there. In Atlanta, you drive there, and it's like there's a parking lot now. There's a new building. Stuff comes up in Atlanta so quick now, like I'll drive by someplace, and there's a vacant lot. I think, what was there? I don't even remember. I drive by it all the time. I don't even remember what was there. Next time I drive by, there's scaffolding. The next time I drive by, people are sitting out on balconies of a building they've just built, waving. I'm like, how is this even possible? So they couldn't call ahead. Joshua couldn't say, somebody, y'all turn on CNN and see if they've got any aerial views of Jericho. Let's check the intelligence. You just have to wait till you get there to see what it looks like. And when you get there, it doesn't look good. And Joshua's learned the hard way, don't say anything, because the last time somebody said something negative, it cost us 40 years, and I'm just not in the mood to do another 40 years in this wilderness. When your mama said, if you don't have something good to say, don't say anything at all, it's just like, oh, snap. And what cracks me up about it, and the Lord said to Joshua, see, exclamation point. It's just so, God just sounds so cheerful right here. Like, see, I have given Jericho into your hand, its king and the mighty men of valor. This feels like a trick question. How is that possible that you've given it into my hands? We're not even able to get in there. How? Like what? But God's like, see, don't you see it? Any of you married people ever had a spouse that found a house before you did, and they had a vision of it that you don't see yet? You remember when... say what? Well, the classic one is Green Acres. Oliver Wendell Douglas, he just, his vision of being a farmer is something he's always wanted to do. He doesn't care about New York or being a famous attorney. He wants to be a farmer. So to him, Mr. Haney's old horrible house that he buys looks like a palace. When she drives up, she's like, are you serious? And his vision is, look, land spreading out so far and wide. And she's like, keep Manhattan, just give me that country. You know, she's like, no, New York is where I'd rather be. Or I'd rather stay. I get allergic smelling hay. Man, when she's on that balcony and she's, I just adore, you know why I live in a city? Because when I was a kid, I'd see her up there and think, I feel you, sister. I just adore a penthouse view my own self. But, you know, that's the whole series was based on that premise. He saw it entirely different than she saw it. And sometimes it takes a person to help you see what they're seeing. Like, don't judge it right now. Let me show you. What I visualize, we could rip out this wall and put in a new bathroom, and the other person's like, I don't know. I don't see it. But the point is, what he's saying is, Joshua, until it's not just that you say it, but until you see that you can take the city, you're not going to be able to take it. So when God says to you, see, don't you see the possibilities here, and you don't see it, you just have to say, I do believe, but help thou my unbelief. Like, I'm willing to see it. It's not quite in focus yet. I see men as trees walking. If you can't see it yet, then be willing to see it. And this next thing, I'm just going to go, this is just 2 or 3 or 4 of the prophets. I think this is Jeremiah, Amos, and Zechariah maybe. First one is Jeremiah 1:11, where he says, the word of the Lord came to me saying, Jeremiah, what do you see? Like when you read many of these Old Testament prophets, when they would have a prophecy, it would start with, they'd have a vision, and God would say to them, well, what do you see? Tell me what you see. What does it look like to you? It's like a Rorschach test. Like, what does this show you? How do you interpret this dream? And it's interesting because it's God giving the prophets a voice. He's not saying, I'm going to tell you what you see. I'm asking you, what do you see? And that's all carried up even into the New Testament when Jesus says to his disciples, well, who do men say that I am? He could just as easily have said, who do people see that I am? How do they perceive me? The next one is Jeremiah 1:13. He says, the word of the Lord came to me a second time saying, what do you see? Here's the next one is Jeremiah 24:3. Then the Lord said to me, what do you see, Jeremiah? There's this cadence all through this chapter of God's not telling him what he sees, he's asking him what he sees. It's like him asking another prophet, can these bones live again? Then the next one is Amos. This is Amos 7:8. The Lord said to me, Amos, what do you see? The next one is Amos 8:2. And he said, Amos, what do you see? You see, this is a pattern with these prophetic voices. They're saying, God asked me to define it. How do I interpret it? Let us make people in our image and let them have dominion. Let's see what they see. You know, if you can get a hold of this, your adult children will not annoy you as much. Because you allow them to see the world through their paradigm and to applaud that and to say, wow, I wouldn't have seen that. But if that's what you see, go for it. Zechariah 4:2, another prophet. He said to me, what do you see? Do you understand why I'm showing you all of these? And the word see is in capital. I'll show you that. This is Zechariah 5:2. And the angel said to me, what do you see? You see that even in the book of Revelation and certainly in the book of Daniel, where God is constantly saying, what do you see? What does this mean? What does this mean to you? You know, there's no higher honor than for someone to consider your perception. Because most people go through life telling you what to see. Was that all of them that I had? Or was there one more? Okay. That was just a little sampling. If I dug more, I could show you even more Old Testament and New Testament where God is saying, what do you see? Again, the 12 spies. It was Moses saying, go in and tell me what you see. And you know the story. It's my one basketball anecdote. Can I tell it to you for the bazillionth time? This would have been, when was Dominique Wilkins on the Hawks? This would have been like late 80s. Cause I know Jared was alive because he was a little boy and I took him with me. But I was invited to be, I don't even know how I got this connection. I was invited to be chaplain for the Hawks one evening. I asked Jared about it the other night. See, I've got a picture of me and Dominique together, and I didn't even know he still had it. I don't know why I chose this passage, but it's the story of when the 12 spies, when he says, tell me what you see, and they said, we saw the sons of Anak there, and so in our own eyes, we were as grasshoppers. So it's a great teaching about, I've been teaching on perception, for decades. It's a great thing about, like, if you see yourself as a grasshopper, somebody's going to squash you. Like, they didn't see themselves as giants. In relation to the giants, they look like grasshoppers. So because that was their self-perception. Y'all with me on that? I don't know if you've ever actually talked to NBA players in person. They are literally giants. I mean, Goliath of Gath was only 9 feet tall, and some of these guys that are playing ball now are 7 feet something. It's totally common now to hear guys 7'2", 7'3", they just keep getting taller. This is back when there was an African guy playing. His name was Manute Bol, and you can't believe how tall he was. So I'm sitting there with these guys. I don't know what in the world. It's like a demon possessed me. Why would I, of all things, to choose this passage? So I'm saying to them, I said, it's all about perception, which now in retrospect, let me give myself a little, just because they're physically tall doesn't mean they might not have had some issues. This might have been the word of the Lord to them. Maybe I was right all along. Don't judge me. You don't know me like that. I'm going to change the way I tell this story. I was right. I'm going to get a call from somebody today that's going to say, you don't remember me, but even though I was 6'9", I was feeling really small. So I believe I did the right thing. It wasn't a demon. It was the Holy Ghost. But my point is, I said to them, the guys who were in the circle, including Dominique, I said, have you ever looked at giants and felt like you were a grasshopper? And as I said it, there was a white guy on the team, John Concac, I always remember, because I remember looking down at his foot, was right next to mine, and his foot was like that long. And I said, have you ever felt like there were giants in the land and you were grasshoppers? And they're all looking at me like, no, we actually are giants. And I remember thinking, I've chosen the wrong passage. But again, I think maybe I was right all along, and who knows? Just because somebody looks fierce on the outside doesn't mean they don't have some issues on the inside. So maybe I was right. The steps of a righteous man are ordered of the Lord. But the point is, on the surface, I was like, next time, read the room a little better. Know your audience a little better. Because it was the way when I looked at them, have you ever felt like a grasshopper? They're like, because these guys have been, they were like 6'5" in 5th grade. All right, let me show you this. This is by a quote by Arthur Schopenhauer. It says, "Every man takes the limits of his own field of vision for the limits of the world." Meaning, if you never get out of the tent, you have no idea that there are stars in the sky. In the book of Revelation, John says, he said, "I saw a new heaven and a new earth, and there wasn't any sea." And you know what? I've never heard anybody teach on this also. I always thought it was interesting. Why did he say there wasn't any sea? Because in the ancient world, whatever was on the other side of the ocean or the sea was non-existent. You had no idea. And people thought the world was flat. People think it's flat again now, which can't get my head around that one. But anyway, they do. Now, I mean, I could, when my kids are like Jonah's in the UK right now, I can text him while he's there, and literally as I'm typing letters and words into a device, he's reading it across the sea. So technically, there's no more sea. I know the sea still exists, but it's not a barrier anymore. But if you don't know, if you don't see that it's a small world, if you don't see, if all you see is boundaries, then you're going to think, well, the world's limited. You know the story of Chicken Little. Remember when it was an acorn hit her head and she said the sky is falling? Because that was her perception. People in the ancient world believe certain things that now we can look at and say, I don't even need discernment to know that that has to be rightly divided. The next quote I want to show you, Robertson Davies says, "The eye sees only what the mind is prepared to comprehend." I like this quote because this is what it says to me. If you're having revelation, if you want to call that a paradigm shift, that's fine. But if you're having revelation, it means something's about to happen. Which comes first, the chicken or the egg? They're both happening. Did Joseph's speaking of his dreams to his brothers speak that into existence, or was that already going to happen in the future and his dreams were a sneak preview? Both things are true. You're creating the future and the future is already calling you. You can't understand that with your mind. I've shared this with you before. The Hebrew, when it says they that waited upon the Lord will renew their strength, you know what it literally means? That it's the Greek word that talks about when strands of threads come together and braid around each other and become a rope. It technically means you're fashioning a rope to the future and you're pulling it to yourself, but the future is pulling you into itself. It's happening simultaneously. Again, it has to be spiritually discerned. But if you're having revelation, revelation means something. Today when I walked in, Beth said, she does have these two verses in my mind. One of them is, we know that when he appears, we shall see him as he is. And the other one is, as he is, so are we in this world. I said, I hear what you're saying. Because the way she was raised very similar to me, our theology was, a man named Jesus is going to physically appear in the clouds, and when we finally see him, we'll be like him. I think that's a very limited view of that scripture. There are people who do crazy things in the name of Christianity who just haven't seen Jesus. When you see the real Jesus, you know why the world hasn't totally come to Jesus yet? It's because people have tried to get people to see Jesus the way they see him. If you could just show people the real Jesus, the real Jesus is irresistible. There'd be no way you couldn't resist him. Or whatever Jesus represents, the God, the real God. When people see the real God, they're not put off by the real God. You know what people put off by? Is people imposing their rules and regulations, their perception of God, saying, you can't know God if you do this because I would never do that and I know God. So it has nothing to do with God. It's about people trying to conform other people to their image. I mean, how deep do you want to go with this? Have Christian missionaries done good work? Absolutely. But there's also been a lot of not just trying to make Christian disciples, it's trying to make Americans out of them or make white people out of, like imposing, here's my European paradigm, and the only way you can know God is to know the way I saw, because I had Germanic painters paint a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus, so until I can make you conform to see him, you're just savages. That's why, again, I'm going to tell you this again. We went, I think it was our first time to Uganda, Ernie and Avery with me. The youth group at the church, they did like an indigenous dance, which was really cool. And they had tribal gear on, and I've talked this kind of thing about with Wellington. Wellington is not his tribal name. Wellington is your European name, because Anglican missionaries, and they did good work. They also tried to Anglicize Africa. And you have to be able to define, and I'm making a point here in just a minute. But I remember watching these kids. It was, the girls were, the dance they were doing was kind of seductive, and the boys were doing these drums, and they were like really into it. I'm just telling you, there was a strong sexual vibe to it. Can I also say it was holy and anointed? I don't know how to tell you that, but there was so much joy in what they were doing, and I could tell people kept looking for my reaction. Like, are you cool with this? I'm like, no, this is really cool. I know white men can't jump. I know better than to get up there and, I'm doing it too. I'm like, no, probably not. I know where I came from. My people were from Ireland, where we just danced a little jig. I know my people. But I got up and I said something that would be considered controversial to my professors in Bible college. I said, can I just say that your ancestors, because, when they were worshiping the sun or the moon, they were worshiping the real God. It was until somebody else came along and said, that wasn't God. He's, God's only through this man who didn't even look like the real Jesus. Have I gotten too deep there? You understand what I'm saying? And so that's why when you hear people talk about, I can say the same thing about the patriarchy, because there's still men that say women can't preach. Well, you're not allowed to. Do you know how many anointed women have had to just sit and shut up and let their mediocre husbands steal the show just because somebody said, I can only see God through my masculinity. And I have to make, even though you're a woman, I have to make you conform to my ideas of gender specificity. Can I really rock your world here? I know it's confusing when people say, well, here's my pronouns, him, her. It's confusing to me too. Can I also say it's causing people to rethink exactly what gender is, which in the big picture is going to help people understand better who God is. Because you know what God's pronouns are? Them and they. Let us make people in our image. It's the very definition of the Elohim. Is God a he? Yes. Is God a she? Yes. Is God a they? Yes. It's what the word Elohim means. Literally, the gods. What? And I know that sounds, and look, it's not even my deal. Do you understand? Like, I've never had gender conflict. As I always say, the LGBT, those letters are light years away from each other. Gay people don't understand gender issues any more than straight people do. But clearly, there are people who say, I am both. You know what Paul said? In Christ, there's neither male nor female. So God is all of the above. All of the above. I will end up just say he just because I'm speaking in code. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. And there's a great concept of God being our Father. Can I also say not everybody's had a great relationship with a father, so it's not relevant to everybody? Tricia and I were having a conversation last week after the teaching. And she was saying to me how much my teaching, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to put words in your mouth, had changed her paradigm. And that's basically what you were saying. And last week I talked about childhood issues and how your paradigm is shaped very much by your history. And she didn't have to fill in the blanks. She said, I had some stuff go down in my childhood. You know what? If you even told me, I would probably go, yeah, that sounds about. I mean, I'm not minimalizing. I'm saying, okay. I mean, I kind of already hear what you're. Is it okay for me to be saying this? What your spirit is saying. In other words, not all of us had stellar childhoods. And there was a specific point I made last week, and this isn't just about parents. This is about any authority figure that you've had in your life that has sent you mixed signals. Like you may have had a grandfather that did something really terrible to you, and you still love him. And that's conflicting to you. Like, how could I love that guy? That guy did this to me. How is that possible? And I said, when we were talking about it, I said, this is so nuanced. Some people will not even get this. But I said, to me, I'm always saying that it's, my theology is yes and, not either or. The same thing is applicable to not just parents or authority figures, but things that have happened in your life. Just hear what I'm about to say. If you say, let's say hypothetically, my daddy was an alcoholic and a rageaholic, and he beat me, but he put me through college. He did all this. I said, when you say the but is like making excuses for him. If you say and, it's a nuance, very slight. But if you say and, he was an alcoholic, he's a rageaholic, and when I was in trouble, he was there for me. Do you understand? If I say either or, it's like I'm defending him or her, or I'm trying to explain them. This is a whole different paradigm to say good and bad things have happened in my life. And I can look at all of it. Even the things that I've created, at the end of the creation, God looks back over all that he has created and he says, it's good. It's not an either or. It's a yes and. So, can you have trauma in your childhood and have wonderful memories in your childhood? Absolutely. And do you see, it's a small tweaking of a thing. But if I say this, and this happened, but, no, leave the but out of it. Bring the and into it. This happened and this happened. And it's all been a part of the experience. And here's a thought. All things have worked together for my good. If I put the but in there, it's not all things. I'm saying it's the things that I liked. It's the pleasant thing. No, all of it made you who you are. And so you need to embrace the and. I don't care how, you might have been abused, you might have been neglected, abandoned, you might have been in poverty. I guarantee you there were great things about your childhood that you wouldn't take anything for. How can both things be true? Because of the and. God is all and in all. I don't have to make excuses. I don't have to say, yeah, that happened, but no buts. Just and. That happened and that happened. And it's all how you see it. Because if it's but, then you're still saying I'm having two different paradigms. No, two things can be true. A flawed person can raise you. They have their own unfinished business. And you don't have to make excuses for them. They could have messed up your head. If I wasn't preaching, I would use a different phrase. But also, we're always there for you. It's an and. And that's where I'm coming to in looking at everything. Yesterday, we went to one of our favorite places for lunch. And as we were walking in, Ken said, can you imagine what it would be like if I couldn't walk right now? Because, the pastor from North Highland that helped me do Dad's funeral, his sister, who was Ken's age, had a stroke like a couple of days after he had his, and she died. He just did her funeral Friday. He said, can you imagine, what it would be like if you were having to help me walk in here, and we sat here and I couldn't talk. I said, it's a very real thing with a lot of people. Was that a good thing that happened? No, it kicked us in the pants. We're not totally over it yet. But today, he said, how do I look? I said, why are you dressed up? He said, because I haven't been able to wear this suit. He said, I don't even remember buying it. He said, you bought me this suit when we first got together. He said, I haven't been able to wear it in all these years. And I just wanted to wear it today. I was like, you better go with your good-looking suit on. Now, do I want, I'm not thinking, shoot, I need to lose some weight. I'm like, I don't want to go that route. I'd rather not, thank you very much. But it was an upside. It was like, I've been wanting to wear the suit, now I can wear it. I'm like, you go. Someday you're going to have some fried chicken. We have laughed so many. You remember that years ago we went to Bee's in Chattanooga, which has the best fried chicken. I'm sorry, the best in the world, because they get it. There's a chicken farm right up the street, so that chicken's not frozen. When you eat their fried chicken, it was running around a yard 6 hours earlier. I mean, it's the best I've ever had. I'm a Southern preacher. I know fried chicken. And I have a video. It comes up in my memories every couple of years. Where he was like drunk on the food. So I said, what was your favorite part? And he goes, fried chicken. I have replayed it 10,000 times because it makes me laugh so much. And right now I'm like, not right now. You can't have no fried chicken. Yeah. I know. We will. But my point is I can't say, well, he had 3 strokes, but he's in a suit. I'm like, no, I don't want to say, because that's saying but sounds like I'm minimalizing it. No, it was the valley of the shadow of freaking death. And what else happened? He looks good today and wore a suit. It's not either or, it's yes and. It's a totally different way of looking at your life. And then we'll end with this. I love Thoreau, Henry David Thoreau. The question is not what you look at, but what you see. It is only necessary to behold the least fact or phenomenon, however familiar, from a point a hair's breadth aside from our habitual path or routine, to be overcome, enchanted by its beauty and significance. What he's saying is it's just the tiniest little tweak in a paradigm that makes all the difference in the world. One last, speaking of this past week, Tim Waltz's son, Gus, is 17 years old, and he is what they call neurodivergent. It's not technically a learning disability. It's a way that he sees things. And what it does, and I thought this was really interesting because there was been some people making fun of him, which I'm like, good God, what kind of monster are you? You're making fun of him? Like, if one of my boys cried and stood up and said, that's my dad, I'd pay $1,000. Like, that's what every father lives for. And I could see in the crowd, I thought, there's something is up with him. It's not, he doesn't have Down syndrome. It's not that. It's something is different about him, but a beautiful soul. And his mom, both his parents are teachers. His mom had written an article about him a few months ago for a magazine. And it's a way he learns. I mean, he's not completely nonverbal, but he just learns differently from mainstream kids. But this situation with him, she said, makes him hyper aware of everything. And that's what Thoreau's talking about. He's saying, you know what he's basically saying? I think it pisses God off to walk through a field of the color purple and not notice it. That's basically what he's saying. Because some people go through life and, you know, if you ask them, are you blessed? Like, I don't know, not really. Other people, they can't count the blessings. Every time you see them come, like, here they come with their blessing. We've got to hear about that. And they're not making it up. That's what they notice. They notice it. Last week, when he said, I want to go to OK Cafe because I hope they have lady peas on the menu. They have those once in a blue moon. I said, well, let's go see. Well, I mean, we would have eaten there anyway. We go there, and the waitress comes up, and she goes, our vegetable today is lady peas. I'm like, now, is that a miracle? I don't know. If you're hyper observant, you'll see that as, if not a miracle, miracle adjacent. But, buddy, some people go through life, they're so ungrateful and so self-absorbed and have such a victim mentality that Jesus could walk in and hit them upside the head with a blessing, and they wouldn't recognize it. Makes me think of verses like, he daily loads me with benefit. Loads you. One interpretation of that scripture is he runs you down and overpowers you with blessings. That's why, like some people can read a verse of scripture, they don't get. I can read, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. I'm like, I feel that. I know what that feels like when you have an embarrassment of riches. So much good has happened that you're like, I got to tone it down. I'm going to make people hate me if I keep telling them all the good stuff that's happening. But it's good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. And some people don't even notice it. They're standing in the middle of the ocean and don't even realize they're wet. So if it takes being neurodivergent to notice stuff, because other kids his age would probably, a typical 17-year-old would probably be sitting there detached. Like, yeah, whatever, Dad. That little guy pops up and goes, that's my dad. Because he's feeling it in the moment. That's my point. Some people don't even notice it. They don't even notice it. And when they have the feeling, they don't respond to it. That was such an honest, it just happened that a camera caught it, where he's, you can tell he's responding, and he's crying, because it's a overwhelming thing to see thousands of people standing up and honoring your father. But he can't hide the emotion. That's my dad. But that's the way, whatever your paternal idea of God is, to your point. That's my point. That's my point. Everybody else sitting in there going, yeah, whatever. And you're like, no, that was God. And people, let me end about perception on this. The more you see it, the more you see it. You hear me? The more you see it, the more you see it. You'll get to where everything starts speaking to you. Everything has a message. Every sign. Everything is a confirmation. And if you say, well, that's good, it happens to you, it doesn't happen to me, you just don't see it yet. You don't see it. Baby, you don't know, just you driving over here today, you don't know how many times you miss death by just that much. You realize when you're driving on a street, there's other cars coming at you the opposite direction at great speeds. And you're like, you're so used to it, you could have a head-on collision at any moment and you don't even notice it. You're so used to missing them. What if we noticed it? What if we got so neurodivergent that every time we passed a car, like, oh my God, I passed another one. Oh, I missed another one. Oh, I missed another one. You walk in, y'all are not going to believe this. I missed 300 head-on collisions today. Let's all stand. We see it. we see it. Once again, just if you see it, just lift your hands. Gratitude. Gratitude. Honor. Thanksgiving. Awareness. Perception. The lamp of the body is the eye, and our eye sees. Amen. Did you get anything out of this today? Please remain standing, and we'll do the outro.
Contributing to Metron is quick and easy. You can give anytime using any smartphone. Text the amount you would like to donate to 404-620-5044. You will then receive a notification that you successfully completed your donation. You may also visit bishonthennow.com and click the support tab to give there as well. When you contribute to Metron, you're also donating to the charity or organization of the month. Thank you for your investment into Metron.
If you have a check, make it to JESM. If you have cash, just pay it forward. I bless your perception, your ability to see, and I speak a selah over all of us, that we pause and calmly think of the word that has come forth today. God bless you. Go in peace.